Good day and welcome, everybody. Welcome to Metaverse and the Future of Entertainment. We've got a fantastic panel for you today and some really deep experience and interesting perspective on the entirety of the industry. So we'll look forward to getting into that in just a moment. But we do have a great video off the top that I think will set the stage perfectly. So maybe we can roll that video. Fantastic. Well, that should get us rolling nicely. My name's Chris Overholt. I'm Overactive Media's president and CEO, and your host for this great panel today. And with me are, again, three distinguished guests, all of whom will bring a unique perspective to this conversation, I know, and great energy and engagement. So without further ado, let's get started. First, Carson Woods, Chief Experience Officer at 888 The New World. Carson is, according to LinkedIn, the leader of the digital renaissance. I loved reading that. And so we're going to count on you a lot for a perspective on NFT and crypto. And you're our evangelist today. So Carson, welcome and thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me. I love that. I will try to do my best here. It's a lot of pressure, but I think I can handle it.
Very good. Nothing like a bold intro to get us started. Next, Steffi Bao, founder and CEO of Init Esports and Init Sports. 20 years experience in the motorcycling and cycling industry, now moving into sim racing. An athlete, a speaker, a mentor, and a friend. Steffi, great to see you again.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm very happy to be on this panel and talk about the metaverse.
Very good. Welcome. Welcome. And finally, and without ado, Chong Jang Eng, my colleague and board member at the Global Esports Federation, the executive director of Refract Technologies, and again, a great friend of mine in the industry. Chong, thanks for joining today.
Thank you so much for having us.
So listen, let's get started. Maybe what we should do so our audience has a great perspective on each of your backgrounds is two things. First, take a minute to introduce your companies and where you spend your time every day thinking in this great new industry we're all engaged in. And then secondly, give us each a perspective on your view of the metaverse. What is it to you and how do you define it in your own words? So Carson, as the self-professed leader of this renaissance, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. My name is Carson Woods. A lot of people know me as Carson Daly, though, which is either my alter ego or like my evil twin. But I am many things. In addition to being the leader of the digital renaissance, I am the Chief Experience Officer at 888 The New World. 888 The New World is the very first NFT art and gaming platform that is actually founded by artists and the architects of the digital future. So our platform is slated to go live in February of 2022. The founding family of artists are some of the biggest names in the space that are really driving the momentum and the adoption of Web3 and of NFTs for artists and creatives. we have a really interesting and different approach. We have the lowest lowest royalty cut of a platform because we really believe that artists should have financial autonomy, and it's also a very community focused platform. Wherever you are in your journey, whether you've never minted before or whether you've had many successful jobs on other platforms, there's a space for you at 888 The New World. And to answer your question, what the metaverse means to me, I think there's two definitions that we think of. Like the technical definition of the metaverse is this environment, this gathering place made up of 3D objects that's accessible via some type of other extension of our reality, whether that is through a HTTP or through a video game. Or through a VR headset. But really, I think the most important definition of the metaverse is this empathetic definition that it's a gathering place for deeper communal bonding, social interaction, engagement, and building, whether that's brand building or community building or self-identity building. I think it's a place that is just perfect for the opportunity to have personal freedom and autonomy and opportunity.
Very good. Carson, thanks. That's a great start. Steffi, let's talk about Init and how you're spending your time. I mean, sim racing, I suppose, is by definition a virtual world in itself. But talk a little bit about your work at Init and your view of the metaverse as you see it today.
Yes, I'll do a little bit of a short intro. Why I love sim racing is because I am a former racer. So yes, I was a racing motorcycle for a living in my former career and was able to win 3 world titles. And then, with all of the transformation, that we are living nowadays, the digital world, the sim racing for me is putting together a passion and something that is very actual and people understand. That's why I think sim racing is actually cool, because for the naive people, it's relatable because everybody's been in a car. And sim racing is about esports and it's about competitive video games. So you can race into those simulators and feel like you are in the real car, but without having to worry to crash it, and get hurt, right? So the other good part is like the racing team per se, they are using now sim to be able to practice because it gives an opportunity to really learn the track and makes a lot of laps in the track, and at the cost of a fraction than what it is in doing in real life. So by putting this passion together, I created Unity Sport, and we focus mostly on creating special events because the goal of the company is to bring esports and the digital world to the masses in very simple terms. So again, we run on the wave of the sim racing because the car is relatable, but we love to have conversation and explain and educate, what is this whole revolution of Web 3.0 that is happening. So to answer the question of what is the metaverse for me, it is almost like an internet in 3D. That's how I like to say it, because everybody goes, on the internet to find all of the research and information and everything they want. Now we have an opportunity to make this 3D in a 3D and therefore create a new world, if you wish to explain it like that. And we can do it better. That's the thing, right? We can reconstruct everything and mold it upon what the world is right now, but do it better, And for me, what is really important is to keep it open for everybody because DEI is very important, and we're gonna get the chance to really do something meaningful, in this way.
So that's a great, actually, lead into Chung, that collision of esports and traditional sports coming together. Chung, that speaks a lot to the work that you guys have been doing at Refract. So maybe talk a little bit about that and that collision that, many of us are starting to refer to as active esports.
Thanks, Chris. So we at Refract have a vision, and that is to extend the human experience beyond reality through innovations in gaming and entertainment. We do this by using things such as what Chris has stated, which is the creation of new experiences. For example, the ability to carry out sport in a virtual way. And we try to do this by increasing the immersion of players by allowing them to use their actions to control a physical avatar within virtual space. However, as you can guess by what I've described, this does not just limit it to the creation, the playing and actually of the simulation of physical sport in virtual spaces. But what it actually allows you to do is to have greater immersion in virtual spaces. Because while it is, in a certain sense, already the keyboard and mouse is already extremely optimized for your interaction in virtual spaces, what if you could take what people have done within the Nintendo Switch on VR and increase your level of immersion such that when you move, you're able to move in virtual spaces. Like when you take a step forward, your character in the virtual space actually steps forward. When you punch, the same thing happens. So that is what we've been trying to do. And we are trying to build the hardware and software layer on this, and actually to go beyond what we have done to create what I like of what Steffi Bao said was what we like to do. What we intend to do is to create unique and exciting experiences, which are different from that which you can experience in real life. Because the very point of gaming is to allow you to be a hero or to be something else which you cannot be in real life. And that is something we hope to increase the immersion of using our technologies.
Amazing. Great start. Okay. So Carson, let's come back to you for a second. I did a little bit of digging on 888 today. And one of the things, and you mentioned it earlier, one of the things I was really struck on was this notion of community first. So maybe talk about that and talk about how important that is to not only your strategy, but how you think about the metaverse and its evolution in the years ahead.
Well, I think the best use case and kind of the best example of the importance of community has to do with NFTs right now. And we can look at some of these collectible projects and series, also known as like the PFP series, like CryptoPunks or Bored Ape Yacht Club, Cool Cats, Cryptodes, any of them. Those are really at their core, they're brands and they are building a brand, but that doesn't happen unless the actual supply, the token supply, is fully minted and is sold out and has some community built around it. I think that momentum can build and develop prior to selling out, but really it happens once that initial supply has been kind of locked down and distributed. And in that case, we're thinking about how brands are being built, and it's almost like it's like a reverse model that we're familiar with in Web 2 and in commercial retail, where a company or a founder has a vision or has a product in mind, and they market that product and sell it, but they've already built kind of the company around it, and therefore they've built a brand around it. So they expect people to kind of fall into place in this pyramid where the brand and the founders sit at the top. And here, in Web 3 and in the metaverse, that's really happening from it's very much a grassroots movement. And without those people, without that community, there's no chance that founder or that vision actually becomes marketable or consumable as a brand itself. So, we have to think about how we're building community and not this, top-down level, but we're now on like kind of this same level playing field that when, it's like a rising tide lifts all ships. And I think that's where there gets to be a little bit of confusion and sometimes dysfunction if you are not able to recognize the importance of those people and treat them as if, they're kind of all executives, they're kind of all board members, they're all, they all need to be active participants in their stakeholders in the decision making of that brand. And I think expectations from those people definitely increase as well. So, when we're thinking about the metaverse, we have to think about how to kind of how to triage and how to really like make everybody happy when you have this community of sometimes between 5,000 and 10,000 people or way more, and it gets challenging. So, there's definitely this sense of urgency, but I think when we're thinking about the future of the metaverse, it's still worth taking the time to consider what the core pillars and structure and ethos of your community ought to be, because that will inform the structure of the brand and in turn a company moving forward. And then, you have something like Artifact, which was just acquired today by Nike. So, things are moving really quickly. There is urgency, but it's also very important to put the foundation into place because that will support the rest of the movement and the rest of the ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of investment happening in the industry. I think Facebook's announced $10 billion investment next year. I think NVIDIA and Microsoft and others have all announced big investments. But maybe I just want to, before we leave that discussion around, I'll call it the democratization of access. Why do you think that's so important to this generation? And Steffi, we're coming to you next because I think that speaks to some of what you were talking about earlier. But Carson, why do you think that kind of freedom to move and that kind of freedom to access platforms like 888, the New World, is going to be fundamental to the entirety of the metaverse?
I think so. I think, Steffi said that it's important for the metaverse to be something that's open and accessible and not owned by one person. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And to answer your question, around the importance of kind of this generation, and I'm a millennial, I think that there's a lot of millennials in the space as kind of the consumers a little bit, and also really the visionaries. But we're definitely the adopters. I think that there's a lot of people who were the very first kind of the last generation actually to remember growing up without digital identity. And, at an age, I think I was 14 or 15 when I went behind my parents' back and made a MySpace account. I always joke that I'm still grounded for, but, I have that memory of what it was like to access the internet for kind of an early formative years. And I wouldn't say the first time. And, an example that I tried to share with my peers is that, I don't remember the last time that I slammed a flip phone shut to end a call. I just woke up one day with an iPhone in my hand and knew how to use it. But I have an opportunity to never forget the first time that I minted an NFT. And I think that's where we have to we recognize that culture moves so fast and that young people tend to be the trailblazers, because if they're not going to adopt it, who will? Because that's the number one marketing technique is word of mouth. And in a social capital within a friend group, especially during formative years from I would say 15 to probably 25, it's all about what everybody else is doing. We don't really have those unique identities and those unique decision-making kind of authorities yet. We're still checking left and right to see who's doing what so that we can feel that sense of fitting in and that sense of community. And, look at what young people in the early 2000 to 2010s did for streetwear. Streetwear used to be something that people wore because they couldn't access the high fashion. And now people want to wear streetwear and they want to stylize themselves that way because it is considered high fashion. And it was because of the adoption and that collective consciousness of young people. So I feel it's huge, and it's also important to recognize that what type of power we're asking for and what type of how we make ourselves emotionally and physically available to those companies or to those other stakeholders or to those other people who are building in return, because it's not this is not a transactional industry. This is not a transactional future. We are moving towards reciprocity. And I feel that's why people love, that's why so many people and my peers really love, the crypto punks or funks or Bored Apes or the toads, because of what is being given back to them, whether that's monetary, whether that's, property, trademark right and commercial rights to be able to create your own new work, build your own career based off of that asset that you have ownership and therefore that you have the rights to, it's a lot of reciprocity going on here. And that's important, I think.
That exchange of value kind of essential to the relationship. Steffi, you talked about access for all. I mean, you're a world champion in your sport. I certainly will never have the opportunity to understand what that meant, how physically demanding that would have been of you, what that experience would have been like, how much it hurt in different ways. But Talk a little bit about what you think sim racing can do for that crossover opportunity between those. You mentioned it earlier in the context of F1. You know, like many in the world, I suppose, I watched the race on Sunday, and
Yes.
I watched the race from Saudi. I mean, what Netflix version of the metaverse has done is introduced all of us to that great sport. And I think what you have in mind for your sport, and to some degree what Chung's thinking about some of his technology, there's an opportunity there, isn't there? I mean, to help draw new audiences.
Yes, absolutely. It's just the opportunity to bring new people, into do something that they might have a passion for. So sim racing, it's very racing in itself is very expensive. So what you tend to have with that is like only a vertical of people, a category of people have the opportunity to be able to get involved. With sim racing, you bring the cost at a fraction of what it is than doing in real life. So therefore, the very cool thing, in my opinion, is that it can be open to everybody. Now, even people with disability can become a race car driver. I mean, as you were saying, Chris, I think Formula One from Abu Dhabi this past weekend was one of the sport most watched in the whole world because of the drama. But think about it, it's still very much male dominated, and there is only one black guy in there, which is Lewis Hamilton. So if we can open this up, think about the opportunity, imagine the opportunity that we can get somebody, let's say maybe in Africa, that can start the sim racing just even from their phone, and people in the industry can kind of see, hey, maybe this person has a potential. So the opportunity to give a chance to anybody in the world, it's so powerful. And for me, it's like what makes me want to continue to do this more and more.
That's an amazing point. The idea, and I think it builds nicely on Carson's point, right? The idea that it can be for everybody, that it can be inclusive and collaborative in its orientation, and reach to the four corners of the world. That is amazingly powerful. Chung, I want to pick up on something you mentioned, because again, this idea that we can evolve to be more in a virtual world, that we can grow to be bigger than maybe what our real life opportunity presents for whether that be our ability to access or our ability to rise physically to a certain level. Talk a little bit about that, and talk about why you think it's important to what you're doing, and why you think broadly it's important to the metaverse as part of the experience.
So I think that the importance of actually being able to become something else than you actually, and to do things which you normally cannot do, is because what you are trying to do here is to go along with that capability of the internet, which is to allow you to be someone else other than what you are, to actually aspire to more. And beyond that, that is actually something which is actually similar to what Steffi has been talking about in sim racing, which is that it would sim racing allows more people to experience the sport. It's the same thing for what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is not just to create these new experiences and things of the sort, but also to allow more people to have access to these opportunities. And actually also to dream bigger, to achieve more. So for example, the dreams of actually being the Jedi Knight in Star Wars, or to actually be a magician or things of the sort, requires more interactivity, because with the mouse and keyboard, there's still a certain distance between you and your character. But with the physical actions driving your character, that becomes something even more special, which is what the magic behind VR. Beyond that, the other important thing about this entire thing, what we're trying to do, is we are actually trying to optimize the build, because what we're doing is actually similar to motion capture, is actually to drive down the price of this, because like what Steffi and what Carson has said, which is democratization of the experience of these virtual experiences, is actually very important, because what you're trying to do here is to drive down the prices to the extent that anyone would have access, and you'd be able to not just play, but also to create content using motion capture at a very, very low price. Yep.
Let's build on that idea of access. And Steffi, I love the point that you made around inclusiveness in particular. What are the social implications of this? I mean, the critics would talk a little bit about, there could be anything from issues related to privacy to, to internet addictions, however that might express itself for the individual. I mean, I think, it's easy, spending time in the industry as I do, it's easy for me to see the upside in this, but what's the balance here? Steffi, how do you think about the positives and some of the challenges that come with this new world that we've all stepped into?
Yeah, first of all, I'm a very positive person. So I tend to look always on that direction. But, there are people that thinks, in the negative side too. I mean, I think create a digital identity is incredibly important. We are doing something with our company, try to create in the sim racing world like a digital license. Again, try to make it relatable, right? You have a driver license to drive, on the real car. We're going to make a digital driver license. So, people understand what that is, because it's important to create a method for accountability. Because once you know who you are, then all of this problem, the people that hide behind their tag name, hopefully they can get collapsed down, right? And that's one thing that I know a lot of people say, oh, the internet, there are predatory behavior and whatnot. Well, a solution, again, can be to create a digital identity for that. And on top of it, I really think that as a society, we need to listen. And all of these young guys and girls, now the Gen Alpha is telling us what they want to see, right? So maybe in another way, I look at this as an opportunity to finally, as a community, as people in this world, to have a chance to actually to listen instead of just keep going and doing what we think is right. So yeah, that's what I think.
Well said. Well said. Carson, you were talking earlier about, minting your first NFT. I have a friend who's working in the space right now, developing her own platform, and she talks about mintable moments in one's life as part of a real life experience. And so I wonder how you think about that and the crossover that can exist between IRL and the metaverse.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. Like, this has come up a couple of times, especially in the last 6 months when people have started to feel a little bit more comfortable going out IRL, traveling to, NFT NYC and Art Basel. And, the brakes might start pumping on this again, unfortunately, but it was fun while it lasted. One of the things that I kept coming back to, thoughts in my mind kept being like, I wonder if like Andy Warhol and Bianca Jagger and all of those people while they were inside Studio 54 really recognized that they were inside Studio 54 and what that meant in that moment versus what it means for me to say right now. And, this is the same. So when you talk about mintable moments, that comes right to the front of my mind every time, because how can you begin to measure a thing that has the potential and definitely has the trajectory to become the way of living, in the same way that, www.com and Web 2 and internet and smartphones all became the way of living. And, the arguments that when I was trying to press my mom to be able to get an iPhone when I was younger, she was like, why do you need a computer in your pocket? We just got one at home, and now it's, well, why would you buy that when I could just right click and save it? Like these arguments and these things, like, a lot of people I think they get defensive or they try to default to this argument about being in a bubble. And I do very much think that we are existing in a bit of an echo chamber, because we tend to gravitate toward the people and have the conversations to the people who get it in our lives, because it's easier for us. And it's quite challenging emotionally to have the labor and the burden to have to explain to people why something is revolutionary or why something is critical as digital identity, as critical as being able to have an on-chain hygienic reputation for the exact same thing that Steffi is talking about in sim racing, but in the real world and in your own actions and within a DAO and within a decentralized community. But, when you take a step back to think about like people and moments, these mintable moments in life, like there's an opportunity for everything. And there's an opportunity to actually mint these memories and to mint these things. And I truly feel that anything that, is minted on an ERC 1155 or an ERC 721 chain, like will someday be historic in that it will be, an antique. In the same way you can go to, you can go to a flea market and probably find like an F1 like toy figurine, and it's historic and antique. And that's where non-fungibility comes in, right? Because Steffi and I could walk by that same exact booth at that flea market, and I may be like, that's cool. And Steffi might be like, oh my God, like this, do you understand how cool this is? Like, that's what non-fungibility is. And I think that tends to be getting lost in all of these collectible and PFP projects, because we're almost, it's almost the antithesis of non-fungibility to create something that has such a small percentage and therefore has a massive rarity and say this is the most valuable. That is actually like kind of contradictory to what non-fungibility is, which gets back to, the difference of the toy at the flea market and Steffi and I walking by it is like what matters to us. But I think like that is going to be, we'll be talking, I think I'll probably still be talking about that, or we'll be watching this recording in like 5 years from now. And so people will be like, damn, she was onto something.
As the leader of the Renaissance. So how should we think about value today? I was in my digital wallet this morning and looking at the value of Bitcoin and Ethereum and watching the markets broadly and thinking, like a year ago, most of us didn't even know what that is. Still today, globally, the world barely knows what those things are and what decentralized finance is. Most people didn't know what fiat was before this all started. So how should we think about the value of any of this? And then I want to pivot to gaming in particular. And Steffi and Chang, I'm coming to you in a second, but I want to talk about the gamification of what it is that you're doing and how we think tokens and NFTs fit into that space. But maybe for anyone, again, how should we think about value of these things when someone buys an NFT, Carson and I, it might be anything that's relatively important to me, but some of the values that we're seeing attached to these things are, unimaginable even a short while ago. How do we think about that?
Sorry to jump in. I'll just take this and say that, I think it's very intangible and it's hard to measure right now. When we think about the value of a Prada bag or, a Supreme sweatshirt, you're able to create kind of a relative, price sheet. How much did it cost? How much did the fabric cost in sourcing of the materials? How much did labor wages cost? How much is that brand worth value, like in totality to people? How much was shipping, handling, warehouse, all of that? You can kind of create a price. But when you're thinking about NFTs and art, there's no such thing as like an overnight superstar. Like if this idea, this concept that, people can have a hit single overnight or can become, celebrity overnight. It's like you don't see the 10, 15, 20 years of their career that they spent, with discipline and direction and motivation and like this inarguable tenacity. And like, how do you put a price on that finally in life and in art and in entertainment? And I think that's where, when we think about value, it comes back to like, it just depends on what resonates with you. And I think we have to take the time to ask ourselves what we value in ourselves first, because that starts the conversation for what we can see and value and honor in other people and how we want to kind of put a dollar and cents amount on that like intrinsic and deep emotional connection that we might have with people, whether it's through a game and through a gaming and esports community, whether it's through art, whether it's through other forms of entertainment. Like it finally starts with us asking ourselves, like, what is our own value and what do we value in ourselves?
Interesting. So Steffi, when we think about the gamification of esports, whether it be racing or any of the esports that were attached to it, Overactive Media, how do you think about the role of the currency inside the game? And I loved your analogy to the digital license. We're watching companies. One company in particular out of Australia, I think it's called Engine Gaming, is working on what they believe will be a uniform kind of tokenized currency that can cross-platform. Honestly, I think the first to figure that out and get the acceptance of publishers broadly will have hit the gold mine. But just talk a little bit about how you think about tokens and currency inside of games and racing more particularly.
Yeah, so again, I think we need to go back to listen, meaning that the younger population that is plugged in constantly into the metaverse and gaming and the digital world will tell us, what is preferred. Also, I like to put a point in a way that I think one of the good things that we should do as a thought leader in the community is to figure it out a way how we can use cryptocurrency in the digital world to teach financing to those countries. There is not something that comes around very often. Because if we are able to do it in this way through a device, there is a phone, and believe it or not, everybody in the world owns a phone. I've been in Africa, in rural area, they have phones, they have cell phones. They might not have TV, but they have cell phones. So if you're looking in this way, now this is a tool that is in the hands of everybody. So kids love games, right? They entertain themselves on the gaming platform. So if we can use this to teach financial literacy to a lot of young people in the world, then we have an opportunity to really make something very powerful and more, in a way that is understood from everybody. So the tokens, they're coming out, they still have a lot. Every day somebody comes up with a new token, right? But by listening to what the people really accept the most, I think that's the route that we need to take as eventually a unifying currency, that everybody can use around the world into everything, gaming or, buying ticket to go watch a concert in the metaverse. So that's also another way, that I see the metaverse evolve, like create events or a race. A sim race, like now you'll do it in the metaverse, and instead of going to a stadium in real life or a circuit in real life, now you go to the circuit in the metaverse, with your avatar, and then you watch the race there. So, yeah, I mean, the possibilities are endless for sure.
I love your point too. Again, back to the metaverse for good. And the technology being leveraged for inclusiveness and reach. I was watching Ariana Grande on Fortnite Rift earlier this afternoon, and wasn't that amazing? And I was thinking about my Olympic experience, and with every respect to my friends in archery is only one example, but the Olympics has had archery as an Olympic sport for years and years. It's not a sport that other than those who love archery around the world, typically are paying much attention to the Olympics. Writ large, swimming gets a lot more attention in the Olympic context than archery, of course. But I think archery takes on an entirely new dimension as a sport if you can experience it from the inside, at distance, virtually, actually with some kind of education around it, creating that kind of access from that perspective. I think archery becomes a lot more interesting in a lot of ways. Yeah. So I think there will be lots of examples of that in our lives, that maybe new opportunity is open to us, new education afforded by virtue of what the metaverse and the virtual experience can provide at distance. So listen, I'm mindful of our time, and I want to go around the horn a couple of times. So maybe I'll give you both. I'll give you both the questions, and then you can all have a moment to think about them, except you, Carson, because I'm coming to you first. So I want to know who, in your estimation, whether it be a company or an individual or a platform, who's doing the most interesting work. And then I'm outing you, right? So now you're either going to make a friends or a few enemies in this one, Carson. And then I'd like you each we're going to go around that circle, and then we're going to come back full circle again. I'm going to ask you each for a prediction in the next 12 months related to what we've been talking about today. So Carson, who's doing the most interesting work in your in your experience?
This is such a, I wish I had a I was able to prep for this one, because I know as soon as I say something, I'll double back on it. I'll just think about, who comes to my mind right now. I'm not saying that they're the best of all top cap 100, but, Complex Media, which is probably the premier media platform and kind of property host of all things kind of consumable content related to pop culture, entertainment, streetwear, fashion, music, hip hop. They've always been incredibly ahead of the curve as far as identifying trends and creating consumable content that helps to expand people's ways of thinking and helps people to connect with people and concepts that seem out of reach. During the pandemic, Complex reacted really quickly and created Complex Land in place of Complex Con, which Complex Con, if you've never been, I mean, when I went to Complex Con for the first time in 2019, it changed my life as far as being a young person in my 20s from Vermont, trying to connect with this industry and this group of people. It's so much more than a trade show or like a festival. It was that first experience that I had. And they built an amazing virtual experience that they've now continued to build and push forward. And they just had their Complex Con again. They skipped a year and they just had it in November, in November of this year, and had probably the best integration of digital retail and digital assets and digital goods that I've seen yet in a IRL event. So I'm just really proud to know them. And Neil Wright is their head of experience there, and he's always been thinking about this stuff. So just commend them for sure.
Great. Yeah, I was just introduced to Complex Media in the last 6 months, and you're right, incredible work. Really cool.
Okay.
Really cool. Steffi, what do you think? Who's doing the most interesting work in your view?
Well, beside the four of us, then we are here on this panel. I think we are doing something right to be in the panel. I would like to give definitely a shout out to Paul Foster, because I think with the GEF is really, really trying to make this work connected, and everything comes into that. With the Global Esport Federation and the Metaverse and games, it's really, really trying to connect everybody and every leader in the world. And as far as companies per se, I guess I can pull a little bit of two companies that I'm working with. The one is Gamer Safer, which it's a company that's really, really trying hard to create these digital identities and make sure that everybody in the new Web 3.0 are safe. And also the Nemesis, which is the company that made that little video at the beginning that we showed, which is trying to really much to put together all of these different concepts of the metaverse, meaning like what Cheng was saying earlier, everybody that has their own way to want to be a hero, and they're really trying hard to give the possibility to everybody to create their own world, kind of like a plug and play. If you want to be a pirate, you can be the pirate. If you want to be an astronaut, you can be an astronaut, and create a world where other people can come in, be part of your community, and be whoever you want.
Great. Very good. Thank you. Chung, what do you think? Who's doing the most interesting work, compelling work in your view?
Since the others have talked about systems and all this, I think perhaps let's talk about the interaction. I think that one of the most interesting things which is being done is actually seeing it in the field of VR itself, how it's becoming more democratized and how it's become more desynced. It's hard to put a pin on any single company, but I would say, and I hesitate, but I would say perhaps Facebook and the rest, you could say unfortunately, but with regards to what they've done with the Oculus is really amazing, because now the Oculus is actually self-contained and it can run on its own. And the implication of this is that, and also at the pricing which they're offering for the Oculus, it actually makes it possible for everyone to actually be able to be interacting with virtual reality worlds at a very, very low cost. Because I believe it's at something like 300 to $400 per Oculus now, and that is actually quite amazing because it can run untethered from a computer. That allows for much more immersive interaction with metaverses, whatever people create. And there's also been some relatively positive things which should come out of that, such as you no longer need a Facebook account in order to access that, which is actually a big boon to other metaverses which are starting to be created in the virtual space. Yeah,
I think you're right. Sorry to interrupt. Carry on,
please. No, please.
I was going to offer. Carson was earlier talking about the evolution of our phone technology and the death of the flip phone, so to speak, and the new emergence of the NFT. And I was listening to a podcast this afternoon. If you haven't listened to Scott Galloway's podcast, it's really worth a great listen. Prop G, and he talks about all manner of things, but oftentimes reaches to technology. And he was talking about the advent of the Apple car, soon to be with us, it seems, and just how no doubt elegant and what a great brand expression that will be. And Oculus, I think, has become that in a lot of ways. And think about what Apple and other companies will be able to do with that technology eventually, right? Think about all of the elegance that is afforded to an Apple product. Wait until they come up with their VR technology. I wonder just how sexy that'll be. Okay, so Carson, not fair to you to come back, right? So I'm not going to do that. Steffi, I'm coming to you, and then Sean, Carson, you get the last. You get to bring us home. So okay. Steffi, I need a prediction. Give us a prediction in the next 12 months. It can be anything related to what we're talking about today.
Let's see. I really wish that in the next 12 months, we were able all together to create some sort of an idea of the metaverse where really, truly everybody can participate in. I'm not a fan of doing a centralized movement. That's not what metaverse is. So unfortunately or fortunately, like Chang was saying, Facebook is trying to go that direction. I think if it is more open to everybody and we can really stick with that concept, we will be doing something very good in the next 12 months.
Metaverse for all. You've been our leader of social good on this call, Steffi. Well done. Okay, Chang, what do you think? What's your bold prediction for 2022?
I think that what I hope, unfortunately, predictions are really difficult to make at this point in terms of hardware, hardware and software. But what I hope for is that there would be a way for the different metaverses, or there would be the creation of certain standards, etc., which would allow different metaverses to interact with each other. Because I think that for metaverse to try to be all things, like to be the complete platform for everything, is really, well, it's not advisable. But what I hope for is that you could change, for example, a pirate sword into a lightsaber, or a lightsaber into a katana in the Japanese thing, something of that sort. So that when your character goes from one metaverse to another, you're not starting from scratch, but that you would be able to do this. I know that this would be a little difficult because the point of some of these walled gardens is to keep people there. But what I hope is that they can see it as being part of a whole. It offers them far more value. So I just really hope that we could that the different metaverses which are coming to existence, or different game companies, will start working on systems and alliances which will allow for the transformation of basically NFTs, or rather items from one universe to another. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Okay, Carson. So big year for you. I'd be disappointed, frankly, if your prediction wasn't the wild success of 888. But let's just take that as a fact. That's exactly what's going to happen, and give us another one.
I would be remiss not to say whether, maybe this is the Carson Daly coming out of me, but I would say prediction would be Ethereum to 10K, but in all seriousness, outside of that, I think it's possible that we 100x the number of digital wallets that people are creating and signing up for. I hope more than that, because frankly, even 100x is too small for me. It feels too small. But I think also my prediction is going to be that, and again, similar to Chong, maybe this is more of a hope and kind of an optimistic outlook, but I really hope that we have moved away from, or at least expanded beyond, this idea of these PFPs and kind of these lotteries for hitting big, minting something that moons and making money off of it. I think that that's fabulous, and that's a great case study, and it's incredible amount of luck and fortune, and it's definitely an equalizer, a financial, equalizer. But I hope that those people are taking that money and reinvesting it into more artists, more ideas, more innovation. I'm not very inspired or interested in having the same conversations and leveraging this new technology to recreate the same systems that people use to create wealth and fame and fortune in the world of Web 2. I'm interested in arguments and in contention and challenges that the other side can't Google to find the solution to, and in this case right now, we're seeing it with crypto punks and crypto funks, and we're seeing it a lot with Bored Ape Yacht Club. And for me, that's just using your punk or your ape persona to create, or that character to create a DJ or to, sell coffee, to brands a coffee company. It's not interesting to me. I'm happy for people who are doing that, but I'm not interested in it because I want to see innovation and I want to see things that have never been done before, because we can effectively suspend this belief that there are any types of limitations at all here in the metaverse, whether that's physical limitations, like we're talking about sim racing, and accessibility and inclusivity for able-bodied people or people with disabilities or any of that. But as far as actual physical limitations of gravity and physics and chemistry and biology and all of that psychology, just for fun, pretend it doesn't exist and see what you might come up with. That's interesting. Polarizing and ideas and concepts, that's exciting to me. So maybe in 12 months, I hope that there's some contention and some stress. But that's how we get ETH to 10K.
Yeah, there you go. Well, look we're coming up in an hour, and that's been one of the faster hours I've had this year. So thank you all for your great contribution and for a great conversation. I'm really struck by especially in these times, I'm certainly struck by all of your relative optimism for this stage in our development, this world that we live in, and this world that's evolving around us. You all seem very hopeful. You all seem like it's an opportunity for a generation of fans, a generation of consumers, a generation of artists, and those who love sport. And that's really compelling. And a big part of the reason, frankly, that I took the step that I did in my career to jump into this space is because it was so compelling to an entirely different generation, a generation that thinks differently about their media and entertainment choices and everything that comes with. So thank you for that optimism and for that rosy disposition in this call. And thanks to each of you for your time at what I know is a very busy time for everyone around the holidays. So with that, I think we can wrap it up. I wish all of you a very, very happy holidays. Everybody on this call the same. And thanks, of course, to Microsoft, the great supporters of this panel and of the conference generally and broadly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Be well.